From beach renourishment to parking, those are some of the issues that Isle Palms Mayor Phillip is tackling. I talk one-on-one with the mayor for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Isle Palms Mayor Phillip, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Hey, good morning, Quintin. Thanks for reaching out and getting us scheduled again. I appreciate it.
Oh, yes, sir. You're very welcome, actually. Needless to say, there's a lot going on the Isle of Palms, as you know. And I was scrolling through my Instagram feed. And of course, just Tuesday, you all had your city council meeting in which you actually had a link to that particular page for people to see. And of course, you had a couple of action items. And I want to go first to obviously the big elephant in the room, which is the beach shuttle, which I know you told me just a couple of weeks ago that is doing fine. And I know that the city council actually received a presentation for Carter's FY25 budget. The budget includes funding to continue the operation of the Beach Reach shuttle that actually runs from the town center of Mount Pleasant to French Beach on the Isle of Palm each weekend between Memorial Day and, of course, Monday.
That's right.
So tell me, Mayor, let me ask you this. When you all looked at that budget, how much was the budget for the Beach Reach shuttle?
Yeah, so the Isle of Palms, as you just mentioned, we split it with the town of Mount Pleasant. So I think on our budget item this year, I think it was around 10,000. I think the first year or two was right around 8, Quintin, but this year with everything going up, I think it was right around 10. And we're certainly committed to continue to support that as well. So.
And speaking of that support, how long do you all have a contract with Carter to continue this shuttle, actually funding the shuttle, that is?
Yeah, it's a year-to-year conversation, Quintin. Carter puts it in their budget, we put it in our budget, so it's essentially year-to-year that we, us and the town of Mount Pleasant, continue to support this important service.
Now, since obviously Memorial Day, how many people have actually traveled from the town from Mount Pleasant Town Center to Front Beach?
Yeah, I think the Carter representative Tuesday night said somewhere just shy of 700 folks had been on the shuttle this year. So roughly 60 to 70 people on any given weekend, which, a little bit down from last year. Last year was an all-time number for Carter to have on that Beach Reach shuttle. But, we've had, I think she said, the Carter representative said there were a number of rain days during July, which would typically be their heaviest month. But, we got one more weekend to go. And, if it winds up being 700 to 800 people, Quintin, that's that many cars that we, all kept off the road and opened up other parking places for folks to come enjoy the beach with.
So now that you have all of these people coming over there, how's that allow you all to open up more parking spaces on the Isle of Palms in the future?
Yeah, well, we have about 1,800 parking spots on the island, including the county park.
Oh, yes.
Again, the most is if people will ride the shuttle, that just lets somebody else, have a parking spot, quite honestly. So we're not making any more land, unfortunately, here. So we're kind of fixed on what we can do from a parking standpoint.
So with the little bit that you all have left, where exactly can you put more parking on the island?
Really can't, Quintin. We with SCDOT on the south end of the island at Breach Inlet.
Oh, yeah.
We expanded that parking lot maybe 2 years ago and added some parking spots there. Our two municipal lots and the county lot, they're kind of fixed, if you will, up and down Palm. Some of the avenues have parking, so we're kind of fixed on where we can do parking. So it's not so much adding parking as it is if people ride the shuttle, that just frees up a spot, so to speak.
Is it possible I don't know, is it possible for Carter to actually add more stops near Breach Inlet so that, you can eliminate some of those problems?
Yeah, and Quintin, great question. And we've had conversations with Sullivan's Island and Mount Pleasant and Carter about, could you essentially make a loop, if you will, and have a stop on Sullivan's Island as well. And then to your question, also at Breach, on the weekends, as there's so many people coming over here. It's hard enough for them to stay on a time schedule, just going between town center and Front Beach. You add Coleman Boulevard to that, Rifle Range, coming down Palm, and it would just, I think the scheduling is tough. So I know there's been some conversation about a separate shuttle at some point, maybe to Folly or Sullivan's Island, but that's up to those municipalities and CARTA to work that out. So I think for now we'll just hopefully with Town of Mount Pleasant continue the kind of one way, if you will, coming across the connector.
And how much money is the town of Mount Pleasant actually contributing that is to the shuttle?
Yeah, I think we're both putting in
Okay.
about $10,000.
Okay.
Town center
Oh
shopping
yes.
area has been great using their social media and allowing for free parking there for folks that want to use the shuttle.
Mm.
So it's been a really great partnership, in my opinion, with Town Center, Mount Pleasant, CARTA, ourselves. So I think it's worked very well. It'd be great to have 2 to 3 thousand people riding that bus, and we're kind of trending certainly up over the last few years since it started 3 years ago. And we'll just continue to try different things, whether it's social media or other awareness, to make sure people know it's out there and an option.
So now that you have like at least 700 people or more traveling to your island with this particular bus service, do you see that your budget as far as giving money to Carter will actually increase in the next 2 to 3 years?
Their cost to us in Mount Pleasant is really based on their cost. If
Mm,
gas continues to go up, salaries continue to go up,
mm,
I would expect our contribution to continue to go up, just like everything else, Quentin.
mm.
But again, I think for this coming fiscal year, next year, I think we're again at the $10,000 commitment level. So
And obviously, you talk about the physical budget. Obviously, there's a lot of capital needs on the Isle of Palms. Where do we start?
say, Quentin, you're breaking up on me a little bit. Say that again.
Oh, no worries. I'm so sorry about the Wi-Fi out here. But obviously, you just talked about the physical budget. Where exactly do you approach your capital needs right now?
Yeah. Quentin, that is the balancing act for sure.
Mm,
Something like the CARTA budget, very small piece of our budget that we're happy to provide a community service with. The drainage, is always number one, quite honestly, on the island, to make sure we're moving stormwater and drainage as fast as we can. And we finished 3 big drainage projects this year. Actually, have a ribbon cutting next Tuesday or Wednesday. I can't remember which day we do on our phase 3, what we call phase 3 drainage. We're kicking off phase 4 as we speak, which is an area on Palm Boulevard that's just notoriously been slow draining when there's rain or tidal events. So that'll be our phase 4
mm.
project that we'll kick off hopefully later this year. Physical construction right now, we're in design and permitting and such. Um, we're also looking at doing something with City Hall, Quentin,
Oh,
and
yes.
our budget's not a huge budget; it's about 26 or $27 million a year, and try to fit in big ticket items, to your point, around drainage or City Hall or beach access paths or whatever it is. It takes some pretty good fiscal management to make sure you can fit everything in.
Do you then? I know you don't have the money for it, but is it even possible to hire a consultant to take on some of those tasks?
Yeah, and we certainly have a lot of people around the table with us, Quentin, whether it is, engineers or consultants,
Mm,
that are doing the design and permitting work for us, and the oversight of construction. And we certainly hire who we need to make sure we have a good project.
mm.
Um, but to your question, our staff is relatively small. And it's a lot to juggle, when you're trying to do drainage projects and beach renourishments and other things for the community, to make sure, much less just the day to day running of the city. It is definitely a struggle. So you do, to your question, have to bring engineers or consultants around the table to help you, certainly, to complete some of these tasks.
And I want to get back to that in just a second, Mayor. But you just mentioned that permitting, the phase 4, I believe, of the project that you just mentioned, and you talked about the permitting and design. Who is actually going to be fitting this project? Is from that particular standpoint?
Uh, we are using on this particular project, Thomas and Hutton is our
Oh yes.
engineer
Oh
that
yeah.
is doing the
Okay.
design and the
Oh good.
permitting. We'll put it out for bid when all the permits and easements and everything's in place, and then we'll put
Mm.
it out for bid from a construction standpoint.
And when do you see those bids actually taking place there and the permits?
Yeah. And Quentin, that's always the $1 million question when you're talking about these projects. To some degree, the permitting is
Yes.
probably one of the slowest pieces of this whole thing, depending on which state or federal acronym you have to go in front of to get a
Mm.
permit. I think if I think best laid plans, I would hope our construction on phase 4 would be in the spring.
Mm.
The other hard part here is we try to limit our construction window to about 8 months. So we don't do anything between May and September typically from a major construction project for obvious reasons when we have such the crowds. So it's really a struggle to kind of back to your original question of how do you balance everything, whether it's financially or a time commitment. It's really a struggle when you've only got 8 months construction window to get something done, and you may be waiting, a year or more on a permit potentially on some of these things. So it's an ongoing battle for sure, Quentin.
And another battle, I'm sure, Mayor, as you just mentioned, is the finance part. So, what while you all are actually waiting on the permitting to come through and all and whatnot, how much is that increasing this particular phase 3 and phase 4?
So phase 3 is done.
Okay,
Just from we have a best guess from our engineers, on phase 4 on what it's going to cost, and we've got the money for that ready to
okay,
go
okay.
whenever that happens. So we're not, we're not trying to design at the same time that we're trying to create funding. So we've got the funding part of it taken care of. It's just a matter of permitting and letting all that happen now.
And I know you have to run, but I wanted to ask you a couple of questions as far as beach renourishment. I know the Alpha
Sure.
Palms submitted a permit application to both the USACE and the State Department of Environmental Services for a shoal management project that would actually benefit the beach in the area of Wild Dunes. Since the area has little to no public access, has Wild Dunes Mayor agreed to fund any of this particular project?
Absolutely. I mean, it's again another good partnership, between the resort and the community association and Wild Dunes. So, we're fortunate enough that shoals come off of the Dewey's Inlet about every 6 or 7 years or so.
Mm,
They eventually naturally attach to the island, typically either us or Sullivan's. But when they get close enough, we can apply for a permit to do this
mm,
shoal management. So, it's the ability to kind of help nature along a little bit, if you will. And we've got some significant erosion on that end of the island where there's been some property damage to homes, with the tides and the waves and such over the last 6 or 7 months.
wow.
So we're hopeful, again, another permit that's been in, the public comment period has passed. It will probably, again, best guess, be late this year when we get that permit. So
Mm.
we can start that project late this year, first part of next year, if assuming we get the permit. So again, it's just a slow process, Quentin, but absolutely, Wild Dunes will participate financially in that particular project along with the city.
And I know obviously there's been a lot of social media discussion about obviously the unfortunate timing of most of these properties being damaged. On the Isle of Palms, how many properties have actually been damaged over the past couple of months because of tides and unforeseen weather events?
Yeah, and Quentin, I know you've been out here, so we've got the Breach Inlet end that historically, just like Sullivan's Island, has been accretional over the years. Except for the last 2 years, the Breach Inlet end has really had some significant erosion. I think there are maybe a handful of pools, Quentin, that
Mm,
have been affected down there and ruined. I'm not aware of any structure damage to a house that's happened on that end. In the Wild Dunes area, you've had a couple of garage collapse and some damage to a cars there. Again, I think it's just one, maybe two up there that we've had some structure damage. So again, trying to be proactive with Mother Nature is difficult. And then again, back to your permitting question and financing question. This stuff's expensive, and the state typically doesn't help out in any way on this day-to-day renourishment maintenance of our beaches, which is unfortunate and a battle we're fighting at the state level.
mm.
But so I hope that answers your question.
Well, then, Mayor, let me just ask you the obvious. Then, do you, as the city, I should say, the city of Isle of Palms, just go to public tax funds in order to fix this problem temporarily?
So we have a beach renourishment fund, Quentin, that was put in place in 2014,
Mm,
and that was a change at the state level that allowed a community to add an additional 1% to their accommodation tax.
Mm.
So that's what funds our beach preservation fund is, hotels, short-term rentals, 1% on top of whatever their rate is goes into this beach renourishment fund. So those are the funds we use to attempt to maintain the beach.
Wow. Okay. And how much money have you used from that fund so far?
Probably, since this erosion cycle has started on Breach Inlet and up in the Wild Dunes area, we'll probably, by the time this is all over, we have the shoal management project and the Army Corps project happening.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully this year, we will probably spend somewhere in the $2 to $3 million range, between scraping sand and
Oh, yeah.
sandbags,
Sure.
trucking sand in,
Sure.
and another set of engineers that help us on the coastal management piece of it.
Mm.
So it's probably in that kind of a number for us this year once everything will settle.
So, since these erosions have happened, and obviously we've had Tropical Storm Debbie and other events, how has that changed that coastal management plan for the city of Isle of Palms?
Yeah, our coastal engineer is here not every day, Quintin, but pretty close to it. So between our staff and our coastal engineer, typically somebody's on our beach every day during this time of the year, and then during this time of erosion that we've been having. So the effect is, to your question, you're spending $2 to $3 million that you really hadn't anticipated spending, and having to turn pretty quickly with some contractors to place sandbags or scrape sand at low tide. Just trying to protect the beach and the properties and the access points. So it's a
24/7 process. Yes, sir. I think it's my Wi-Fi there, but I think I can keep going nonetheless. But I'm having some technical issues. But I saw something on social media recently, and someone posted a photo of sandbag, I guess, residue flying around a couple of beaches. How do you all take care of those sandbag issues once they're flying around or floating around other places?
Yeah, and that's a good question. Yeah, and I've seen some of that same posting. And actually, Quentin, those sandbags were from the 2017 big erosion cycle, right before we had
Huh.
a huge beach renourishment project. And those were actually placed. They're an older type of bag that we don't use anymore, and I don't even think they're allowed in South Carolina anymore
Sure.
because of what you saw on social media. They fall apart.
Yeah.
They're plastic, but those bags were actually placed by residents
Oh.
trying to protect their property in 2016, 2017, when we were also having some erosion issues.
Mm.
And those bags are supposed to be removed by the residents at that, when the project's over, before we renourish, and somehow they were just missed. Quite honestly, I'm not, I can't rewind the clock and know what happened, but
Right. Right.
the bags that we're placing out now at the Wild Dunes Inn and the Breach Inlet Inn are a different type of bag, much hardier, much sturdier, and better for, kind of building protection, if you will. So the city is putting all of those bags out. So we'll be responsible for removing those before the shoal management project and before the Army Corps project on the Breach Inlet Inn. So that's on us to remove those. But I think the state agencies are following up on those bags that you saw on social media and that have been out there for a while. And my understanding is most of those have been removed at this point.
And I want to go back to that show management and obviously Wild Dunes. Are there any plans, Mayor, to enhance public access to the section of that section of the beach?
To the Wild Dunes Beach,
Yes, sir.
there's been some conversation, but again, that's going to be a Wild Dunes,
Mm.
decision, a community decision that if they wanted to open up some type of access. But we've got 56 access points on the island, a lot of parking scattered all over the island. So there's places for folks to go. But again, that would be a Wild Dune decision to open up the community, if you would, for some type of public access.
Now, with this shore management project, is this work necessary since the sand that is shore will naturally attach to the shore in the next 12 to 18 months?
That's correct, and that's true, Quentin. It's probably at its closest point right now. Again, I'm not a coastal engineer, but it looks like it's about 100-ish feet at low tide off of our coast right now. And while those shoals are coming our way, it also exacerbates the erosion in certain hot spots. So yes, it will attach eventually, but while it's coming our way, it's really causing issues and doing the property damage that we're talking about up in the Wild Dunes area. So, you have the opportunity to do this shoal management that just lets you harvest a little bit of that shoal before it attaches so that you can not have to truck in sand or put these sandbags out on the beach. But you can use, kind of speed the natural process a little bit to protect these properties. Put the beach back in place so you can have recreational access and such. So that's really what the shoal management is about. Yes, it will connect, but it really causes erosion as it's connecting, and that's what we're trying to get in front of.
And I want to get back to that in just a second. But how many parcels of land are actually on Front Beach on the Isle of Palms?
That's a good question. On the Wild Dunes end, significant amount of condos. So that would be, in the multiple hundreds for sure. If you just looked at the houses from Breach Inlet up before you get to all the condos in Wild Dunes, I would best guess maybe a couple of hundred, Quentin.
Wow. And how many parcels of land, Mayor, are actually there on the total on the island?
We have about 4,300 housing units, if you will, about 4,600 actually housing units on the island between condos and single family homes.
So, what is the amount of funds necessary for beach renourishment projects on the island for the next 30 years?
Yeah, Quentin, therein lies the $1 million question. So we've been working with our coastal engineer over the last 6 or 7 months specifically on that topic. Especially given the erosion that's happened at Breach Inlet that really hasn't happened in maybe a 40-year time frame.
Mm.
So we've done some projections over the next 40 years with a whole lot of assumptions around erosion rates and inflation rates, and what we would define as an ideal beach profile to allow recreational and public use of it.
Sure.
And rough numbers at this point, Quentin, assuming no help from anywhere whatsoever, it's over the next 35 years, it's about a $200 million number. So pretty significant. Again, I told you earlier, our budget's only $27 million a year. So, we're trying to look at creative alternative ways to raise that money. Again, because the state doesn't have an ongoing funding mechanism for beach renourishment, which we're using our lobbyists to try and change some of that.
Okay.
So it's really up to the individual municipalities to foot the bill, if you will, as far as maintaining the beach and providing all the public safety pieces and trash pickup that you need when we have all the visitors. Some of our beaches in our community, like Folly and Edisto and Pawleys, are managed by the Army Corps. So those are federal oversight and federal dollars that are happening. We're also looking, having conversations with the Army Corps to see what it would take for them to take over our beach. But that is a long, probably a 5 to 10 year road for them to do feasibility studies and get Congress to approve funding. So that is a very long term process that we're taking a look at and haven't made a decision on yet. So we're trying to figure out ways to be creative, from an expense management control as well as a revenue production side to make sure we have enough money to maintain the beach for folks to enjoy.
So, well, let me ask you this then. Do you actually anticipate that property taxes, business license, for instances, parking fines, or even parking fees will increase in order to provide funds for beach renourishment?
Yeah, and I think all that's on the table, Quentin, to be quite honest with you.
Okay.
There's not one thing that you can do that's going to create that kind of a revenue flow for us over the next 30 years. Property taxes, you can only raise so much by law on a given year. A business license, we couldn't raise them enough to fund beach renourishment. Parking is a very small piece to our budget. So again, those aren't going to be numbers that are going to allow us to hit this $200 million expense that we've got out there. And again, that's just for beach renourishment. Yeah. Quentin, we talked about drainage earlier. Right. We probably have $50 to $60 million worth of projects on drainage. Probably another $75 million on sewering the island. So but the beaches specifically, are owned by the state, public access. We really need state help to help us maintain the beaches in an acceptable fashion, as opposed to all these communities trying to cobble together revenue streams and trying to figure out how to make it happen. We really need something at the state level to to help us, because we cannot, to your question, raise taxes or fees or fines enough to get to a $200 million number over 30 years.
I hate to get political, and I know that you all want to get the help and need to help immediately, but what is holding this up?
When you're breaking up on me again,
Oh,
say that,
oh,
ask
I'm
that
sorry.
question again.
I'm sorry. I know that you all need funding from the state as soon as possible, and I don't want to get political, Mayor. But why do you think why do you think the state is holding up you all as far as getting help to the island for these projects?
Yeah. I would love to give you a couple of names to put on your interview schedule to ask that exact question.
I will.
I don't know that I can answer that question. When quite honestly, when you look at, this state has roughly $30 billion annually in tourism that happens. About half of that number comes from the coastal communities. So you would think, just on a math standpoint, that there would be some willingness to fund, beach renourishment at a state level. So, because the revenue side certainly, would tell you to do that. Um, Quintin, the state has helped on some of our bigger renourishment projects. I think the one in 2008, we got a little bit of money from the state, but again, from an ongoing maintenance standpoint, it's really up to us. And I do not know the answer to your question, but I know Senator Kempson's been great.
Yes,
Senator Goldfinch has been great trying to
sure.
get, some type of revenue, ongoing revenue against beach renourishment needs across the entire state. So we would certainly welcome to continue those conversations.
As you know, you've watched many of my Quintin's Close House interviews over the years and been on it for quite a while. And I always ask this, consistent question. But what public-private partnerships would you be in favor for to help with that ongoing funding?
Yeah, and I don't know on this one, Quentin, that there is a private partnership availability. The state, the beaches are owned by the state, and my opinion, until
Yes.
somebody could change it or show me different, I think the state needs to be helping all beach communities, maintain it for the benefit of all the residents and visitors that want to come to South Carolina. It's just it's been a hard push to make it happen. I mentioned to you earlier our beach preservation fee, the extra 1% on overnight accommodations. I mean, that took multiple years just to get the flexibility for a beach community or others to be able to even have that. If the state's not going to commit to an ongoing funding level, then I think there are other things they could allow us and other communities to do to put some of that funding in place. But they've kind of handcuffed us with what you can't do from a revenue production standpoint, and at the same time, they're not committing funds on an ongoing basis. So we're a little bit hamstrung in what is available to us today, Quentin, because we're maxed out on sales taxes, accommodations taxes, hospitality taxes. I mean, we have all of those revenue levers on as fully as they can go. So we've maxed all that out from a municipality standpoint. So we need some extra, either again, state funding or flexibility to do different things to raise additional revenue.
What flexibility you want to use right now?
Yeah, Quentin, if I was king for a day, I would allow a real estate transfer fee to be in place so that on every real estate transaction, which actually is a funding mechanism in the Wild Dunes community today, they charge a 1% fee on every real estate transaction that happens, and half of that percent goes to beach renourishment funding. If we could do something like that on an island-wide basis, you might could do 0.25%, on a transaction,
Yes, sir.
and potentially raise, a decent amount of money to make that happen. But that's not allowed by state law. So to me, that the real estate folks are cringing as they're listening to this interview, obviously. But I think that's one that would be a fairly painless way to let a little bit of every transaction happen. That's just an example, Quentin. I think, if you wanted to raise the accommodation tax another 1%, that would certainly help, but it's not going to fund $200 million, but it would certainly help put a dent in it. But again, we're maxed out currently on what we can charge from an accommodation tax revenue stream for the city. in the state. So, again, that would take another state law change to raise that limit higher than what it sits at today.
And I want to come back to you with that in the next interview that I do with you. But speaking of which, what is the status of discussions regarding charging fees for parking on Palm Boulevard that are presently free spaces?
Yeah, Quentin, as you and I have talked over the last 4 or 5 years now, that conversation comes up and goes back down
Mm,
periodically. We are required to have some level of free parking on the island for access. So, again, another balance to where, we've got paid parking in the county park and in our
yeah.
two municipal lots that are by Front Beach where, the restaurants and restrooms and lifeguards and different things are. We have Palm Boulevard and the avenues and Breach Inlet where is all free. As we're balancing these drainage, beach renourishment, sewer, these big infrastructure items, we're just limited on where we can get additional revenue from, Quentin. So that's why, to your question, the Palm Boulevard charging for Palm Boulevard parking comes up periodically. And again, it would be a decent number that you could make off that parking, but again, we have to balance paid versus free parking, and so that is a very long-winded answer to your question. There's nothing right now happening with that. There are conversations that are always ongoing, trying to think about how we can create additional revenue to cover some of these big infrastructure needs we have, Quentin. But it's just kind of in the mix as far as other things, other revenue producers that we have.
So right now, speaking of obviously paid parking, how much are you all getting as far as that in fees?
Yeah, so our parking is less than 5% of our budget, so about 1.2 or 1.3 million on an annual basis. So it's a pretty small number. And we're not trying to make a living off parking, obviously, or it would be a bigger piece of our budget. But so we're trying to be good stewards for everybody, to balance our needs between public safety and trash pickup and maintaining the lots. And I don't mean to cry me a river or whine about it. We love having the visitors, and it's great, but it costs a decent amount of money to maintain, to have 20 to 25,000 visitors every weekend with us. So, and we're happy to do it, but it's just people have to recognize at some level that it costs money to provide the services for that many people when we're an island of 4,000 roughly full-time residents, and then we have an extra 20 to 25,000 every Saturday and Sunday with us for 3 or 4 months. I mean, that's expensive, and it's just part of doing business.
And of course, they'll be there tomorrow. Well, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and Monday, of course.
Yes, they will, and kind of our last hurrah for the summer.
Yes, and yeah, hopefully they'll stay like this. We don't know. Hopefully, and God
Yeah,
forbid,
yeah.
no hurricanes or tropical storms will come.
Yeah, we've been lucky so far.
Yeah, thank God in heaven for that. Let me ask you this. Obviously, with that parking, you all have switched over to a private parking management group. So, how much of money is that coming out of your budget to pay them?
Yeah, so we did do that. I think it was March 1st this year, Quentin, that we outsourced that. Our police department had been doing that function for us in the past. And we're a pretty small force, and 3 to 4 folks on staff at any point in time. So for them to be doing general public safety work in addition to ticket writing, we just finally got to a point that said we need our public safety folks focused on public safety, whether it's on the beach or in the community, and outsource this parking enforcement, which we finally did in March. So we pay them. This is all public record as
Sure.
contractual. So I think we pay them about 23 or 24% of our parking revenues, and that covers all their costs. And they take care of everything start to finish on a ticket for us now, Quentin. So that's about what they get paid. So again, it's not additional cost to us. It's just kind of a net revenue number, if that makes sense.
Where do you see that net revenue heading in the next 5 years with this particular company that you're outsourcing to?
Yeah. So I think our contract, it may be a 3 or 5 year number, Quentin. Our parking revenue's fairly steady. I mean, the enforcement certainly increased once we outsourced it because that's all they're focused on. Where before our police were focused on many things. So obviously the enforcement ticked up, and you've seen some of the chatter on social media and such around it. But we're trying to modify behavior, if you will, and make sure when people are parking on Palm Boulevard specifically, it's very narrow street, parking on both sides, and if our public safety folks need to get up and down that street, we just need folks parking by the rules, if you will, 4 feet off on the ocean side, perpendicular on the land side, and we've got those spaces marked. So I would not see a significant increase in our parking revenue or expense over the next 3 or 4 years, Quentin, because I think we've got this contract fixed with this company for 3 to 5 years. So again, I hope that answers your question.
What are the typical fines associated with this new company?
Yeah, they're the same as they always have been. Some fines are $50, some fines are $100. So it just kind of depends on the infraction.
Well, now, from my research, May, I see that some of these fines are average or 3 times higher than the state average. So how do you justify that?
Yeah, again, Quentin, when we had them at the state average or lower for a number of years, the behavior was not getting modified. Somebody would, come over and park, and they might get a $25 or $50 parking ticket. And I think the mindset was, well, $50 for a day to go to the beach, that's not that big a deal. So we increased them, and you and I've had this conversation. I don't know, maybe 3 years ago to the $100 number. Again, trying to modify behavior to create the public safety that we need to be sure we have. And again, because most of the ticketing tends to happen on the avenues and Palm Boulevard, where people aren't parking according to the signage. So we're really just trying to modify behavior to make sure we have good public safety avenues going around the island.
So, have you all been able? Well, I know it's a private company dealing with this, but how many people are actually protesting this particular ticketing system right now?
Yeah, I mean I don't know, Quentin, specifically to your question, because they handle all of that for us. And there is an appeal process and an oversight process, or somebody can take it to court if they want to eventually. But the few instances, Quentin, where I've been involved, the beauty of having an outsourced company in this particular one, every time I've been involved, they take pictures of every infraction and every time there's a ticket. So far, the ones I've seen, it's been pretty hard to argue with. When somebody says, "Well, I thought I was parked properly," and their wheels are all on the pavement, or they're not within outside of 4 feet or whatever. So again, I don't get involved very often,
Sure.
but the ones that I have seen,
Right.
they have been very good about our outsourced company has been very good about documenting,
Sure.
and stating the infraction. And again, they have the appeals process in place. So if someone feels like they've been ticketed incorrectly, there is certainly an avenue for them to appeal that.
So, does that avenue go to your police department or to that system, that parking system?
To that company.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
and if someone goes through the appeal process,
Mm.
Quentin, and they go through with this outsourced company, eventually it could be a court case. And again, then that would bring it back to the city at that point, and city would be involved. But up until that point, it's really this outsourced company that's handling the ticketing, the enforcement, and the appeals process.
I'm running out of time. They told me less than a minute, but quick, in 20 seconds, are there any plans to ask SDDOT to amend the 2015 parking plan?
Not to our knowledge at this point that we've had conversations with them.
Alpha Palms Mayor Phillip Pounds, thank you for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close Ups.
All right, Quentin, have a great holiday weekend.
Likewise.